All right, movement makers, it's me and Koyo F. Young Lewis, Chief Impact Strategist at Ibani Song Solutions, back here with an important question and conversation for today. Today's question is, what can your 501c3 say about political issues? And this is going to be a part one because I kind of want to talk overarching big picture about this political campaign intervention ban that's on nonprofits, and then get into some of the grayer space around that. I'm of course going to give you my disclaimer that while I am an attorney, I am not here in my capacity as an attorney. This is not legal advice. This is hardly even legal information or education. I'm really just wanting to make sure you understand the boundaries in which you play, so that you can make really informed decisions about about how your organization shows up at a moment in time where we absolutely need bold, audacious leadership to move us through. So, with that, let's go ahead and jump into this, right? We are living right now in some interesting times, right? This is an election year, 2024. I've been saying this all over my social. Y'all get ready. Like, it's going to be a lot with the text messages, the emails, the ads, all this stuff. We're going to be inundated. And I can speak to that from truth because I recently ran for office twice. So I know that they are gearing up to hit you left, right, top, center with all kinds of political stuff. So it's going to be in the atmosphere. It's going to be circulating, percolating around the work that you do. And if you are a social impact leader, if you are running a 501c3 that is trying to disrupt the status quo in some way, whether that's working for the rights of women through reproductive justice, environmental justice, advocating for children through education, really looking at how we advance more leaders, we expose younger girls to technology and STEM, like any number of things, right? How we make sure that people who are unhoused have access to food and safe, secure things, how we adjust our criminal justice code, like whatever type of thing that you are working on right now in your nonprofit, you are impacted by politics. And we can pretend that it plays outside and this isn't about politics. One thing I hear often when I was running for school board in particular, is we shouldn't play politics with our children. And it's true, we shouldn't. We absolutely should not be doing that, but that is what's happening. And every decision that is made, everything that we fund, every initiative that comes through that gets the funding and support are connected to political decisions. And so the more comfortable we get with discussing how politics impact our work and how we can impact politics legally within the bounds of what the IRS says as tax-exempt organizations, the better off we're going to be for moving our organizations forward. This is also particularly true because your speech as a nonprofit leader, even in your personal capacity, can impact funding, right? And I think that is actually a gross disservice of philanthropy in this space. I'm reading a really great book right now, Just Giving by Rob Reich, that talks about how philanthropy may be destroying democracy. And I do think that there's a lot of truth to that. You'll see some content coming out, percolating about that. But the reality is that those who have wealth and means get to direct how we have conversations about things. And as social impact leaders, we have to become really astute at having those conversations with our funders, with our board members, with our communities to make sure that we're actually leading the change that we need, right? There's a lot of tinkering, very little transforming that's happening. And we have so many nonprofit organizations. Like, if we thought about the number of organizations that are out there trying to combat homelessness or food insecurity, working in education, we should have solved these problems already. Plus, with all the money that's really circulating around in this place. And so we have to ask ourselves as leaders right now in this day and age, if we are trying to build an enduring brand or actually solve the problem that we set out to solve. And so part of that is going to be playing and understanding how politics impacts your work and how you, as an organization, as a 501c3 who has these different regulations and restrictions, can participate in this process in a way that's helpful and advantageous for the causes and communities that you support. All right. So, what can you say about political issues? And I think that one thing that we know that nonprofits hopefully have gotten and fully understand and lean into is that you cannot be campaigning for a candidate, right? You can't say Biden is my guy and here's all the stuff that we're going to do to support the Biden Harris ticket. Likewise, you cannot be like, oh, we're riding with Trump or RFK and be like, going full ham in to support that. That type of activity is absolutely prohibited. You are prohibited from participating or intervening in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for political office. And this is from the top of the ticket all the way down to the bottom. So please don't think that since it's, your local school board that you can really get in there and be decisive on a candidate, because you cannot. You could lose your tax-exempt status. You could get charged excise taxes. Like, there are all kinds of things that can come from that are not awesome. So we want to avoid anything that is a direct participation or intervention for a political campaign. And I want to be clear that it could also be indirect support in opposition. But again, that gets a little murky. So that's a part 2 thing. We'll just start with don't rock around with your organization supports candidate X. That is not good. You don't want to do it. We don't want to run into that issue. Even though you can't engage in direct campaign intervention, you can engage in some lobbying activities, but they cannot be a substantial part of your organization's overall work. So you have to be very mindful about what type of lobbying you can get into, how you can lobby. You have to do a lot of documenting around that. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that specifically later, but I want to let you know that you can engage in some lobbying with certain limitations, but you can engage in limited lobbying activities. And I really want our social impact space to understand this, to think about this, and how you maybe leverage this in the work that you're doing. Why? Because again, I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face this year, your organizations will absolutely be impacted by what happens politically. There are organizations that are getting floods of money right now because people are concerned one way or another about something that's political, and they want to make sure that these organizations have the resources they need. There are others that are getting starved out right now because of political issues that are happening, see wars in different areas, etc. And so they're not getting the resources because of political things that are happening. And so you really cannot ignore this. Not to mention, if you're leading an organization, everybody in your organization is impacted by what's happening politically, whether we're talking about it and addressing it or not. And I do think that that's a place where we need to start thinking about how, as leaders, we show up for our team, especially when we're doing such mission critical work that's often heavy, that's often challenging, complex. We need to make sure that we're attending to how our people are experiencing the work and the reality of doing the work in the socio-cultural, political climate that we live in. And so that is a space that I think that every leader needs to be thinking about, how they're having conversations with their team around the impact of politics, and particularly this political culture right now, on your team members and the work. There are people who are showing up to your job every day terrified of what's going to happen one way or the other. And while we're not here to influence people's political leanings or decisions, and that would actually cause some problems with the IRS in terms of your organization, we can support people through the discomfort, the dis-ease that is playing in a lot of our space. And so I'm also, that's another part, we'll be launching out how to have these conversations with your team in a way that allows people to show up and do the work and know that they're cared for, and not accelerate burnout, mental health challenges, emotional challenges, stress, etc. Like, how do we mine for that in our work, knowing that the work that we do on a regular day in a non-election year is challenging in and of itself. Okay, so no direct political campaign intervention. Don't show up in your nonprofit Inc. shirt, support so-and-so. Red flag, don't do it. You can engage in some limited lobbying activities. We will later explore what that looks like, because that, I think, can be an important place where social impact organizations, those of you who are leading change, can really help to move the conversation forward. You can engage in voter education and registration activities as long as they are nonpartisan. So that means, if you're getting people to understand how voting works, why they should participate, you're helping with voter registration drives to actually get people registered to vote, you can participate in that as long as there's no bias towards or against any candidate or party. They really have to be nonpartisan. We don't care who you're voting for. We just want you to be a part of this process, because actually we should probably as citizens all be a part of this process that directly impacts our lives. So voter education and registration things are things that you can do while being a 501c3. The other place that I think is important for you to think about things that you can do, what you can say about issues that are political of sorts, is issue advocacy. And I would love to work with more organizations around issue advocacy, because the issues matter. And I will tell you that from running for office, I spoke to people who were all sides of the voting spectrum, which, I didn't necessarily know that that's what I would be doing, or those would be the kind of conversations that I had. But I did end up having conversations with a lot of people who, may not have been assumed to believe or think a certain way, but did. And what I was really proud of my team and myself for doing was being able to focus on issues and have conversations with people about issues, regardless of whether they identified as an R or a D or an I or whatever it was. We talked about the issue. This is the issue. Kids can't read. They're unable to read. Literally, the data is showing that these kids cannot read in this district. What do we want to do about that? What does that mean for our future? What does that mean for our security? And having these conversations around issues could be a really powerful place for 501c3 organizations to play, not just because we need to make sure where people understand the issues and help shape the issues so people can see what's at stake, but also because it actually helps to sharpen your ability to talk with your funders and your donors and your constituents about the issue. And that is a place that I think a lot of people are being left out. They are not engaged in part of these conversations. A lot of times we're talking vertically to people who have the same level of information and knowledge as us. And when we are talking to people who don't, we might come across as a little patriarchal, a little rude. I have a whole talk that I do with lawyers about working alongside your clients instead of on behalf of. And I'm a big person. I really think that words matter. And so sometimes when you're on behalf of, we can don this exterior or this persona that we know best and not listen to the people who are directly experiencing the impacts of whatever issue it is, right? So sometimes we're going to be more focused on what we think is the best way to move forward when they're telling us, hey, yeah, that's not like, I'm not saying that's not important, but right now the most immediate thing that's probably going to get people to latch on and move forward with you is the smaller win or this seemingly smaller issue. And so I would say that I think issue advocacy is an important place where you can talk about public policy issues, especially the ones that directly impact the work that you're doing, and really get and have robust conversations with people who are impacted by those issues right now. And some of you are leading change. You're like, I used to be in this situation. And I think that's a very powerful and important experience and perspective to have. You're a little further along than those. But I think it's also important to talk to people who are there right now, because some of the way the world has shifted has exacerbated certain elements of the struggle, minimized others, and we need to really make sure that we are connecting with our communities so that we are not advocating for things that don't immediately or even in the long term provide the support that we need. So issue advocacy, again, is something you can do. The limitation, of course, is that it can't You have to avoid any appearance of supporting or opposing specific candidates. There is some dialogue around the fact that you can talk about issues that candidates are divided on, but again, got to make sure that we're focused on the issues and we're not throwing a bone one way to or another about that. And I know and I understand that's complicated, and like we'll dive into that further, but want you to know issue advocacy, absolutely a place that you can play. Sometimes might lean into some lobbying activity, and so you got to just make sure that you're aware of that, documenting that, and making sure that you're under the limit of what you can do in terms of lobbying as a 501c3. The other thing that you can do, and I'm going to call it a can, is just being clear that, again, your individuals, the folks that you work with, you yourself still have individual rights. You still have a First Amendment right. You've still got ability to have some free speech. And so you have to navigate that effectively. But you can still speak out as your personal self, not on behalf of your organization. You may see people who have on their social media, thoughts my own, not my organization, so on and so forth, probably working in spaces where have to be very clear that they're separate from their employer in order to avoid all sorts of potentially lobbying, or here's in the 501c3 space, any sort of appearance of political activities and speech that are restricted. So again, and I know many of you have this conversation, but as a reminder, you just want to make sure that you yourself and your staff, your team, your board are all very aware that they have to make a clear distinction between their own political speech and that of the organization. So got to be careful that you're doing things in your personal capacity and not seemingly doing that as part of the organization. So super easy answer. Don't have on your organization clothes, like identifying that. I do not go live with my lanyard and stuff like that for things that I do in other spaces that I work, because I'm operating in my personal capacity here. Don't use your organization's social media, email, resources, etc. to do this. Don't print off your flyers at work using your company resources to do that. We got to make sure that we're very clear on keeping things separate from work and life, even though, there's a lot of mixing up in that, and a lot of that happens particularly now that we're in this hybrid and remote work era. But you have to really, really be mindful of that so that you're not unintentionally implicating your organization in your work, and that you're also not silencing yourself as a human being separate and apart from the work because of any of those fears. So those are a few things that you can, as a 501c3, say and do that are related to political issues. Like I mentioned, this is part 1. We'll definitely dive much deeper into it so that you can get a little bit more color and context, because it is my goal and hope that we'll be a little bit more bold in this space and actually start speaking up in ways that we can around the things that we absolutely need to move our communities and causes forward. All right, that's all I've got for you in this little 20-minute scoop. If you found this to be useful, I would encourage you to follow me, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can get to it off of the go.leadaudaciously.com/YouTube. I'm sharing there tools and tips for leaders in social impact space to be able to overcome regulatory and operational challenges so that you can streamline your processes, strengthen your teams, and scale your impact. At the end of the day, we are here about the impact, and I want to make sure that you are making real, clear, tangible impact, that we're turning those ideas into actual impact, and we're doing that in a way that doesn't sacrifice culture, capacity, or compliance. Yes, because your girl's a lawyer by training, so I always want to make sure that you're at least operating in line. So get over there to the YouTube channel, subscribe. And if you are leaders looking for a space to really process what it means to lead change, get ready. We are launching a podcast, Disruption Proof, to make sure that you can keep moving regardless of what comes your way. I'm really excited about that. I'm really, really excited about that. So anyway, Make sure that you get connected, subscribe to the channel, and share this with a friend. Tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend. Let's go lead audaciously.